Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, for those that have been listening to this show for a long time, you know my favorite type of episode is when I'm introducing a new author and a new member of our community. That's exactly what we're doing today. So I have Jennifer Ingram on the line. She is an equity and inclusion evangelist, entrepreneur, and executive. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Jennifer. So thrilled to work with you today and excited to go further into your career and really what it means to be an equity and inclusion evangelist and to talk about some of your work and also recognition. So I know top 50 women in San Francisco, and you have some other accolades that have come your way. I mean, you've been a busy woman on your mission, and I'm excited to get into that. But just to get love bringing mission-based individuals and entrepreneurs on the vision and your mission. Like how did that all get started?
I'm industry and sector, philanthropy, healthcare, nonprofits, housing, so has just evolved in this space, but the passion, the rigor, the approach, has evolved. But I would say that what primarily differentiates me is just the approach and the vulnerability that I
Mm.
use and how I approach this work. And so it's been an evolution. It's a story of transparency and quite a bit of vulnerability. And as well as being a practitioner of the work and how I've studied and continue to evolve my own experiences.
And so one of the things that I'm a fan of, especially in your career, is that as you well, I didn't know by the way that you started your first committee in elementary school, but one of the things that I like is that you've kind of seen this evolution of DE&I. Like before it was even, we called it that, and in the past it maybe had other names and other phrases and ways of talking about it in business. But you've worked in both and with both large corporations, small businesses, and other individuals in between. So, what right now, from your vantage point, do you find kind of interesting in the DE&I space, just overall, that you see in that in terms of its evolution?
Yeah, I think that we went from this notion of diversity equals inclusion and the
Mm,
thought that the two were synonymous and that representation and isolation would be the game changer. I think that consistently so, that notion has been proven wrong. While it definitely does matter, representation in isolation is insufficient at driving the types of change and transformation that so many organizations and communities are seeking. And so, with that evolution, I would also add in that the focus on equity is tough, right? It was not always a part of the conversation explicitly, but I think that to approach this work and ensure that there's access, equity, and inclusion are the activators or the action, the ability to lean in and see and create environments and spaces that foster and create the type of security or safety, psychological safety, physical safety, for folks to be transparent and really let the walls down and share aspects of their identity beyond those things that you can see, I think are really important. And so I think that with the shift, we've definitely seen greater focus, greater intentionality on equity and inclusion. The other thing that I would add on that I think that we've seen is a shift from it being kind of the right thing to do and it being more of a moral or values based, which those things are still very important, but I think it's more of an imperative for organizations if you are to be relevant, if your brand is to continue to grow and remain in a space of growth in the marketplace. Having some degree of understanding of how this impacts your organization, your consumers, your customers, and how your brand, and reinforces a sense of inclusion and in the marketplace is also very important. And so that's another shift.
So I want to build this out a little bit. So some of the things you said and maybe take it a layer deeper because I know there will be individuals that watch this or be executives of companies and small business owners that maybe have wanted to bring more DE&I initiatives into their workplace, but they don't necessarily know how, or they're maybe not even necessarily aware of some of the phrases that you mentioned. So for example, you mentioned that it started with diversity, but there was some isolation there. Maybe let's start with that concept and kind of unpack that for a moment, if you will.
Absolutely. I think that early on there was a focus on increasing the number of diverse individuals in a workplace, on a team. And
So
that
we
could
were like
run
checking
again.
boxes, right? So we're saying, okay, we have this type of person, we have that type of person. Okay, we did our job. Am I understanding that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So checking boxes, and often it fell along the lines of gender and race,
Mm,
ethnicity.
mm,
What we know is that individuals with disabilities are
mm,
also present within our workplace. And if you have an invisible disability or something that you can't see, you are less likely to self identify or self disclose to the organization. And as a result, you have folks that may not be feeling that sense of inclusion, largely
mm,
because there may not be the safety, or they may not feel that there is an openness or a sense of inclusion or a pathway for the organization to be responsive.
mm,
Another aspect is, again, beyond the things that you can visually see, it has reinforced a sense of people not necessarily disclosing or even minimizing parts
mm,
of themselves as a way to fit in, as a way to, not be seen as different and not to rock the boat and not to be disruptive to, what some may consider the status quo due to, present conditions, historical conditions, and or experiences, lived experiences, professional experiences
mm.
in the workplace. And, perhaps having had a negative experience or having someone conveyed an experience that was less than positive when they did share. I can't tell you how often, especially when working with LGBT of, be And so, from a very young age, I witnessed that. I would be themselves, largely from a space of, fear of inclusion and fear of, how it could limit their trajectory. And so I think those are aspects that definitely have, no pun intended, calibrated my lens from
Yeah.
a very young age, and how safe or unsafe workplaces or environments can be based on geography, based on history, as well as based on the level that you may be at within an organization. So
Yeah, and I like that you gave us a very practical example because, for people that are listening to this, just to, reflect and think like, what if you couldn't put a picture of your family on your desk, right? That's your personal space within the office. And if you're, in the office, then, to think that you couldn't because, or you maybe wouldn't feel comfortable to because of the environment, like that's a
remove some of those barriers and the lines that have, somewhat historically.
I want to take a moment for the viewers and everybody that's listening, what does it mean to you to be an equity and inclusion evangelist? Because when I seen your title and when I thought, it warms me up and it made me smile. Like what does that title mean to you?
Yeah, so not at all in a religious sense. I want to
Yeah.
start there, right? In the early days, and I'll tell a story. When I was in college, I was interested in the diffusion of innovation. And that is the rate or in which people tend to adopt change. And that's just a really lay description of that. But Microsoft in the early days actually had evangelists. These are people that went around and talked about technology and how it could solve problems, and getting folks really excited about this new and emerging thing. And while equity isn't necessarily new and emerging, I think that the energy that I bring to it and the approach and the passion is definitely reflective of spreading the good news and talking about how good this could be, not just for folks from, underrepresented groups, but for everyone. So I think the term evangelist is really one that spreads good news and
Mhm.
really does promote and accelerate. And so, to your earlier question regarding how has this work evolved, I think that equity is the newest kind of addition to the diversity and inclusion conversation. And so, bringing energy and excitement to the thing that we know is essential to
Mhm.
truly bring about a sense of inclusion, which is equity. So,
Now, I think it's evolving quite a bit, but I don't think we're there quite yet. Like DE&I initiatives and the concepts. When they were first introduced, let's just say in business.
I think have a new expectation of
Mm,
organizations. And so, in consulting, I work with organizations across industry and sector.
mm,
Small organizations, nonprofit organizations, for-profit institutions, ranging in size and scope. But I think that
mm,
the common denominator here is that it's essential to being responsive to what's happening in the world and having a
mm,
lens and a sense of understanding around how you can continue to your brand and your organization's reputation in a
mm,
way that really does align with the needs of people. And I put people just at the center of each and everything. In that, I think we've gotten away from human-centered design and approaches, but I think that what we are seeing is a return back, even in the face of AI. That's another conversation for another day. But I think that putting people at the center, reinforces a sense of necessity to have a focus on the things that are impacting people, the
mhm.
experiences that they're having, walking down the street every day, walking
Yeah,
in and out of the supermarkets, the fears, the concerns, the celebrations, the pride, the identity, all
mm,
of the things that come together, and really being able to have a lens and a view on that and connecting the internal and external stakeholders, realizing that, in many respects, they are synonymous with one another. The
mm,
last point, Adam, that, I'll just add to this is also looking at what is happening. And so with inflation and the various impacts of the economic impacts of COVID and other things, I think that many organizations that in 2020 we saw almost a 43% increase in organizations creating DEI roles. And while I can't say that it is not surprising, but we're
mhm.
also seeing the number of positions and the focus and the positioning of those positions decline. There have been several articles that have come out recently just reinforcing that this isn't the space that organizations should roll back. Instead, they should remain steadfast in the commitment and in the journey and what that looks like. I think that some things you can start a new product line and you can
Yeah,
discontinue it. Starting down this journey and discontinuing, this
yeah,
pathway of equity and inclusion could be extremely damaging to
mm,
your brand and really reinforce a disingenuous nature of how your organization embraced it if it was disposable, or something that you viewed as could be minimized or rolled back when times got hard and when there were tough budget decisions to make.
yeah, yeah. It makes total sense. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily get rid of your CFO, right? Or you can't get rid of your HR director, or you can't like certain these. So why or how is that not a key role? So I get completely what you're saying. So one of the things, Jennifer, that I like to do on this show is I like to give some actionable tips. As I mentioned before, a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, executives will watch this now and in the future. And let's just say that an organization maybe hasn't made the progress in DE&I that they'd like to or hope to, or maybe they're just kind of just getting started. Let's maybe start the conversation there on the organization that hasn't necessarily done this in a very structured manner. What are some of the starting points that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I oftentimes like to, reinforce that there's a top down and a bottom up approach that happens
Mm,
almost synonymously. And so the bottom up approach will continue to happen. You'll hear people within your organization asking questions and serving as disruptive agitators to for the betterment of the organization. But I think where there's truly the greatest area of opportunity is from the top down. For
mm,
leaders to, understand what it means to be an inclusive leader and
mhm,
really understand the power that they have in shaping an experience for their employees. And so I would say number one is for a leader to, become more self-aware, understand what a journey or a pathway towards
mm,
inclusive leadership might look like, and taking stock and really understanding their own lens and how they're viewing the world. So often, and I'm going to introduce a new term, we view the world through a monocultural lens, which is our own lens shaped by our own experiences, our own perspective, without
mm,
the ability to understand the social or impacts or the experiences of others and how the two come together to create experience. And
yeah,
so the more leaders can become self-aware and understand their lens and themselves in relationship to others, I think is a first step. The
yeah,
second is to, ask for candid feedback and assess, how you're showing up. I think that, so often we have a view of how we would like to engage and our intent, but our
Mm,
intent doesn't always align with impact.
mm,
And so look at, how you can strengthen and develop trusting relationships with those that are on teams, with those that report to you, and especially with those that are from underrepresented groups. When we think about how we oftentimes approach data or look at organizational metrics, especially things like engagement metrics or attrition, we look at those numbers in aggregate. Request that your data team start to disaggregate your measures to truly understand and assess where folks might be having a different experience based on their identity. And as you start to see where there are gaps in that experience, ask follow-on questions, but also, understand that you may not get the answers that you are seeking. And so I would also say engaging with the sense of humility as you're having those conversations. But many organizations are data informed or data driven. But as you look to make those steps, I think it's the qualitative and the quantitative, and balancing the two. Historically, we've had an over reliance on quantitative data, but not minimizing or discounting that qualitative or the direct responses and feedback from individuals.
yeah. I want to circle back to that term to make sure I have it right, because that is a new one for me. So monocultural lens, is that what you said?
Yeah. So one
Okay.
culture,
So
one
for example,
culture.
if let's say that if somebody went to, high school, everybody looked the same, college, everybody looked the same. Now you look at the board of advisors and everybody looks the same, then you kind of don't have another view than maybe what you grew up with or who you've been around. Am I understanding that correctly? I just want to make sure to get that right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm adding that one. I knew you were going to teach me something today. You always teach me something every time we talk, but I knew you'd come with it. So thank you. I want to take another side of this. I love all the tips you gave, by the way, the advice, everything. I want to get a little bit more on the side of things for, let's just say you're an organization who maybe feels that you're doing pretty good, and you're thinking you could still be doing better. Maybe you have the role, maybe you have the position, maybe you've been making improvements, but you're not necessarily don't feel that you're kind of ahead of the trend or where you want to be. What should they be thinking about when they're kind of self-reflecting on this?
Yeah, I would say that, a profile of a leading edge organization, has a few things in place. If you have a DEI role, I think that understanding where that role is situated within your organization
Mm,
really does either serve as an accelerant or a limiting factor. And
mm,
so if your role, I would say a leading edge organization has a head of DEI that reports directly to the CEO.
mm,
If you're in HR, you tend to be more limited on human capital or talent related topics versus a broader view of really integrating it into the operations of the
mm,
organization. Thinking about the level of priority of this work, again, having it at a higher level or a direct
mm,
line to the CEO just really does reinforce the decisions that are being made from the top levels of the organization. I would also say, most organizations, be it nonprofit or for profit, have a board of directors. If you're a leading edge organization, your board of directors are having conversations and are asking you guys tough questions
mm,
about the progress and either the lack thereof or the supports or the things that are serving as barriers and making the types of progress, and they are holding the organization accountable from the very top levels. And again, they're looking beyond representation. They're
mm,
asking for metrics beyond a diversity profile. They're also seeking out information and data that conveys a sense of inclusion or belonging or understanding the rates of attrition based on identity and where there could be gaps in experience. And another aspect that I think is extremely important for leading edge organizations is to also view the economic power they have. And so approaching, the this work through a lens of economic inclusion and looking at where they're spending, dollars. Are they spending dollars with small, diverse business enterprises, with veteran-owned businesses, with
mm,
LGBT plus owned businesses, with diverse businesses? And so, also thinking about this in terms of, economic inclusion. And I
mhm,
said that was the last one, but there's one more. I would also say their corporate social responsibility, right? What
mm,
is your broader impact in the community towards doing, good? for society, and how are you leveraging your brand to highlight or shine a light on where there are areas of opportunity that connect to the work that you may do specifically, and how are you influencing and encouraging others to join the steps that can be taken to look at broader systemic and structural changes that we all know are necessary.
Jennifer, I want to spend a little bit of time here today, and I say a little bit for everybody that's watching. This is intentional. We'll be bringing Jennifer back on the show for part two of this interview. So this is just part one of two, and the next interview will be covering in depth Jennifer's contribution in the upcoming book that we're working on together. But keeping it high level for today, Jennifer. We don't want to spoil everything. We're a little bit of a teaser. What are some of the ideas that you hope to propose in the upcoming book?
Yeah, I there are two that I think are extremely salient. One is how we're defining leadership, right? And who is a leader? And reinforcing, not just this level based on social status or hierarchy, but instead, what does it mean to be a leader? And then the second aspect of, the topics that I'll cover in the book is around authenticity. And, what does it mean to be an authentic leader? And I think that we oftentimes talk about these two topics, right? There's nothing new under the sun about the two topics in isolation. But I think what we oftentimes don't talk about or we don't discuss are the opportunity costs and the risk. And so I'm not going to give away too much, but what I
Yeah.
will say, the framing that I use in the chapter is, the tax of authenticity and the
Mhm.
cost of covering as a framing and how we think about when we choose to expend our capital, our social capital, or to lean in and be authentic, and what are the conditions that are most important that reinforce and really do promote and foster a sense of authenticity and inclusion and belonging, and how the two really do connect, and the role that leaders play in shaping environments that foster a sense of authenticity and how they can model those behaviors themselves.
All right, that's it. You probably gave away too much already. No, it's perfect. That's a teaser. Again, we'll be bringing Jennifer back on the show for part two of the interview when the book's live, and we'll do a full deep dive into her work. But Jennifer, I was not going to let you off the show without bringing up top 50 women in San Francisco. I know you're humble. I know in some of these things, but I have to toot the horn on that one. Like, how did all this come about?
So someone actually kind of threw my name in the ring and I was selected. I've done extensive work both, domestically and internationally.
Hmm.
And one thing that I tend not to talk about a whole lot is just the impacts that I have on individuals. I never minimize the impact that I can have. I don't care if I'm speaking in a room of 1,000 or a room of five. I treat all of those engagements just the same. And there were several organizations that I previously worked with in the Bay before even moving out to the area. And so it was a great pleasure to be recognized and to know that I had made such an impact on the lives of others. And I think that my commitment to gender equity is something that is forced in my civic engagements. I sit on the board of directors for Global Women for Wellbeing. I also sit on the advisory board for Xavier University's Center of Women in Leadership. And so, reinforcing how we can continue to promote gender equity at the intersection of all of the other dimensions of difference is something that I just feel so strongly about. And I really do, just care a great deal about, and thinking about how we highlight all women, regardless of, how folks might identify.
Yeah, I think it's great and well deserved, and I'm glad that you were recognized. That being said, I just have to ask. I know you're a busy person. I know you do consulting around D&I as well. I just have to ask. I mean, what's next? What's next for you? What's next also for your career and your consulting?
Yeah, so there are a few things that are giving me a lot of energy right now. I think that speaking on authentic leadership, speaking on topics of equity and inclusion are definitely kind of top tier. But I would also, this is actually first time I'm publicly sharing this, numismatics noir, which means dark coin collector.
Mm.
I'm a coin collector, and so I launched a new brand, numismatics noir, just to reinforce and highlight and diversify a community of coin collectors, as well as how we can view coin collecting as an asset building strategy.
Mm.
Unlike maybe collecting other items, these are things that could appreciate. And for me, the types of coins that I collect also held, they're all US currency, and they feature, my collection anyway, features African American folks. And
Wow.
so, there are about 25 coins that are US currency that have
Mm.
featured African Americans throughout the course of history, the first being in
Mm.
1946. And the most recent was actually just this year, the second African American woman, Bessie Coleman, who was the first African American Native American pilot in the US, is featured on a quarter last year. And I guess gender equity. Last
Mhm.
year, Maya Angelou became the first African American woman featured on US currency on the quarter. And so that's the part of the Women's Quarter program. But numismatics noir is something that I'm really excited about. You can find information about it on our Lens website. Additionally, I would just add that I'm really interested in continuing to support young leaders. And so, I'm a big fan of mentoring and really, equipping leaders with and when I say leaders, young folks are leaders as well, but helping them to see and understand the pathways that they're navigating. And so I'm also doing some work with some of my mentees just to continue to reinforce, what it looks like to continue to grow into the next generation of leaders. I think that's probably, more important than my journey. Is those that are coming behind me. Yeah.
Yeah, big fan of paying it forward, and to know that you're a coin collector now as well. You're just I knew you bring the knowledge for me, Jennifer. I knew you would, but I didn't know that. We've talked multiple times. I didn't know that. So this is interesting, and we'll probably talk offline about that one as well. But that being said, Jennifer, if somebody does want to continue to follow your journey, whether it's the mentorship, the consulting, the just in general, like how do people follow up and how do they connect?
Yeah, so a few ways. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn if that is your preferred base. Jen Ingram, you'll see my face on the photo. I would also say that you can visit me at www.jeningram.me or jeningram.me on Instagram as well.
Fantastic. And we'll put all that information in the show notes so that our audience can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters or engaging in an episode or listening to the content, we're all about bringing on business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and experts and having them share their mission, the reason behind their mission, really what we can all learn from it so that we can all learn and grow together. If that's the type of content that sounds interesting or fun or exciting to you, we welcome you. Hit that subscribe button because we have many more mission based individuals coming up on the line and we don't want you to miss a thing. And Jennifer, really, it has been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait till the next time we get to do this when our book is live.
Absolutely. I can't wait, Adam. Looking forward.